Hello everyone. So I've got my headphones on this time, so hopefully the sound will be slightly better. Apologies for being out of action slightly recently. We went away on holiday and came back to a nightmare at work. So I've not had an awful lot of time and obviously been working a bit on Alcohol Explained too. So I'll crack straight on. There was a few questions I think from the post. So the first one I think was about time frame for the residual craving to leave the body. I suppose there's a few points to make there. Don't forget when you're talking about how long it takes for alcohol to leave the body, the alcohol leaving the body is just one aspect of it. What you need to happen is the alcohol leave the body. That can take 24 to 36 hours, but often that's where your problems really start, because if you've been drinking a lot, when the alcohol leaves, that's when you hit the withdrawal period. And that's the time where you have the excess stimulants that have been, your brain's put in to counter the depressing effects of the alcohol. And that's when you feel anxious and twitchy, and in extreme cases you can have the shakes and all the rest of it. And that can last another 24, 48, even 72 hours. Now, if you're a binge drinker, after that and a couple of good nights sleep, you're pretty much through it. But if you're a regular drinker, then don't forget those stimulants. If you're drinking all the time, those stimulants are inside you virtually all the time, because they don't wear off before you start drinking again. So when you finally stop completely, those stimulants disappear, and they're stimulants that you're used to having in you. So it's the equivalent of drinking, 4 or 5 strong cups of coffee every day and then suddenly cutting it out. So for regular drinkers, you then go through an additional period of feeling very tired and drained all the time, until your body gets used to not having those extra stimulants in. And then don't forget, if you're a regular drinker, you haven't slept properly for however long you've been drinking for, so you then need to get into a normal sleeping pattern, and then you need to catch up on sleep. The comment actually said residual craving. So the craving is something entirely different. Craving is a mental process. So you can quit drinking for 50 years and still crave a drink, because if you sit there and start thinking about how nice it would be to have a drink and you start fantasizing about it, that's what a craving is. So the craving can last forever. You can put work in and make sure it doesn't last forever, and that's one of the purposes of Alcohol Explained. But that's pretty much that one. The other part of that question was the social stigma in the UK around not drinking, and whether you come out, as it were, to colleagues and tell them you're not drinking. I think, so 2 parts of the question. The social stigma in the UK, I think, has improved dramatically. I started working in the city maybe a dozen years or so ago, and boozy lunches were constant. And if you went out and didn't drink, it was just most peculiar, whereas now it's totally different. You go out for lunch and most people aren't drinking, and when you do drink, it's kind of a bit frowned upon. So there's a huge shift in these last dozen years, and I think that's ongoing. We're still a long, long way from where we need to be, but there is a shift in the right direction. Coming out's a very personal thing. Most of the time you do need to tell your colleagues you're not drinking, unless you never socialise with them, but most people socialise with their colleagues. And when you're there, you're not going to drink, and that's going to be obvious. So you do need to tell them, but it's entirely your prerogative to tell them what you want about it. So you can say to them, I've had a serious problem with drinking, therefore I've had to cut it out. Or equally, you can say to them, I don't drink, I don't like it anymore. I'm trying to keep fit, I'm trying to keep healthy, whatever it is. The last few events I've been to, there's always a significant number of people not drinking anyway. So I suppose it depends what area of the country you're in and what your industry is. But I'm seeing more and more people not drinking anyway. And I find as well, I have to explain myself a lot less. So if I'm out with people I've not been out with before and they offer me a drink and I say orange juice or something, often that's it. There's no comment about not drinking at all anymore. So I think things are changing, but I think it's very personal to you. But I think it's worth thinking about it before you do it. So don't just turn up at a function and suddenly be caught on the hop trying to explain why you're not drinking. Think of what you're going to say. So for me, I sort of tell a bit of a half-truth in that I say I stopped drinking when I had young children, which is true, and it just doesn't interest me anymore. I never really got back into it, which again is true, and it ends the conversation without having to go down roads of explanation you potentially don't want to get involved in. The next question I think was getting motivated again after a relapse. That's a sort of a constant one that comes up. It is difficult, and I think there's a tendency for people to think, oh, it was easy last time, but it's more difficult this time. I think you need to bear in mind it probably was hard last time anyway. When it clicks, it feels easier. But there's not really much I can say. I mean, obviously the book's there. If that doesn't help, try other books. There's a lot of good quit lit out there these days. Keeping contact with the group as well helps. The other thing, and this is one of the sort of things I'm exploring in Alcohol Explained too, is about, instead of, because I think there's a tendency with people, like they say to themselves, I'm going to quit, and then the evening comes or whatever, or whenever they normally drink, and then they drink, and then they wake up in the middle of the night feeling awful and anxious, and oh, what have I done? So I'm not going to drink today, and then the next day they sort of white knuckle it through the day, and then get to the evening, and then they give in again. Isn't necessarily the best way of doing it. One of the better ways of doing it is to set yourself a date in the future, a week, 2 weeks, whatever, because don't forget, what we do as human beings, and this is another thing I'm exploring a bit in the new book, is we tend to glorify what we don't have, and we tend to criticise what we do have. And I sort of refer to it as ambition, and that's just a driving force in all living things to want to better yourself. And the feeling of wanting to better yourself, to get something better, is made up of those two driving forces, which is one, glorifying what you don't have, and two, being very picky and critical of what you do have. So when you're constantly going through that process of starting and stopping all the time, most of the day you're not drinking, and you're probably starting to think about how much you want a drink, so it's something you don't have, and then you sort of drink in the evening and that's it. So you can change the dynamic a bit by saying, right, I'm not going to stop for 2 weeks. I'm just going to drink normally for 2 weeks, which is probably what you're doing anyway, because if you're not getting anywhere, you haven't really got an awful lot to lose. But then what you should do is, say you drink a bottle of wine an evening, that's fine, do that. But what you do is you do it when you've got no TV, no friends, no radio, no nothing. You sit alone with that bottle of wine and you drink it in a room on your own and really concentrate on the alcohol. And you think about how different you would have felt had you not been drinking. If you've stopped for any length of time, you will know how that feels. But if not, I can tell you, most of the time you feel pretty good. You wake up well rested, you sleep through the night, you feel fairly buoyant and positive during the day. So what you're doing, you're changing the dynamic. Instead of not drinking and thinking about how lovely it is to drink, you're drinking and thinking about how lovely it is to be sober. So you think about it all the time. When you wake up in the middle of the night anxious, you think about how you would have been fast asleep, resting properly had you not been drinking. When you wake up in the morning, exhausted, having to go to work, you do the same. You think about how you'd feel if you hadn't been drinking. But crucially, you do it when you're actually drinking as well. Because don't forget, we don't drink for the hangovers and the waking up at night. We drink supposedly for the great benefit of having that alcoholic drink. So that's the key. When you sit there and have that drink, if you're someone who normally goes to the pub and has 4 or 5 pints, have those pints at home on your own, because what you're looking at is not the social aspect. You're looking purely at the effect alcohol has on you and analysing it to see if it's really worth it. And that can be a good way of doing it, because you're sort of giving yourself a bit of a run-up and then a sort of a jump in. Hopefully it will give you a bit of a springboard, so that might be worth trying. The next comment was about, I think someone had ordered Alcohol Explained and it had taken 6 weeks to arrive, which is obviously not acceptable, but unfortunately that's Amazon. I can't control Amazon, so apologies for that, but there's not an awful lot I can do about it. And saying about pre-ordering it, you can't read it on Kindle because you've only got an iPad. So this is an important point, I think, because when Alcohol Explained 2 is published, I'm going to do it, I can give it away for free only on Kindle. I can't give away paperbacks, and I can't give away audio versions. It's just not how it works, but you can give away the Kindle version. So you don't need a Kindle to read Kindle books, okay? You don't need to spend a few £100 on a Kindle. You just need an iPad, a laptop, a smartphone, and you download the Kindle app. It's free, and then you can download the book. So when the book's Alcohol Explained 2 is released, I'll put all this in there. But I can only, I'm afraid, give it away free on Kindle. But you don't need a Kindle to read the Kindle version. You just need to get the Kindle app or whatever, and then you can download it for free. So the next one was someone asking about stopping drinking and the cancer risk decreasing and how much cancer risk decreases. And I have to say I don't know anything about that at all, but I found an article here. And this was just a Google search actually, so you can just hopefully Google this. So it goes through all the different cancers that you can get by drinking, which is mouth, throat, voice box, esophagus, liver, breast in women, colon and rectum. They increase with the amount of alcohol consumed over time, regardless of the type of drink, beer, wine or liquor. That always amazes me that people still believe that wine is good for you and beer or liquor isn't. It's the same poison in it. How is it possibly going to be better for you just because it's made with grapes as opposed to hops? So heavy drinkers can have as much as 10 to 15 times higher risk of developing these cancers than those who don't drink. Risk begins to increase after just 1 drink a day for women or 2 for men. A drink is defined as 12 ounces of regular beer, blah blah blah. So you're looking. So if you're a heavy drinker and you're giving up alcohol, you can expect to decrease your cancer risk by 10 to 15 times. Obviously, that's a generalisation. If you're unlucky and you've already contracted cancer, probably too late. And equally, I suppose there's lucky individuals who can drink loads and not get cancer. But anyway, that's hopefully some indication. This is a good one. So someone stops and finds they're spending a lot more money on clothes and coffee. Is it a new addiction? I think you need to be a bit careful because doing something that's genuinely enjoyable isn't addiction. Okay, I always sort of struggle with how you define addiction. But for me, it has to have some kind of negative connotations. You have to be doing it even though you realise it's causing you immense harm. If you've quit drinking and you feel good and you're spending money on clothes, that's not an addiction, that's just a genuine pleasure. And it's more justifiable as well, because when you're not spending loads and loads of money on alcohol, of course you've got a bit of spare money to spend on things like clothes. So I don't consider that to be an addiction, and I would say go for it. And I think there was another comment there about putting on weight and drinking loads and loads of coffee as well, which brings me on to a slightly different subject. But don't forget, when you're drinking, it's an anaesthetic, okay? It takes the edge off problems. So the natural tendency for drinkers whenever they have a problem is to reach for a drink. So over years and years and years, you learn to deal with your problems, your emotions, by reaching for something to consume to make you feel better. So when you cut out alcohol, there's a tendency to keep doing that. Okay, you're not reaching for alcohol, but you start reaching for food and you start emotional eating or drinking too much coffee or all the rest of it. And that comes back to having a plan in place to deal with stress. Okay, when you stop drinking, life is hugely better, but it is still life, and life has its ups and downs, and you will have bad days, everyone does. Okay, so when you have those bad days, you need a plan in place to deal with them. So if you envisage your triggers will be having an argument with your partner or a bad day at work or whatever, you need to visualise when that happens, what you will do about it. Personally, I use exercise. Other people use yoga, they use meditation, people use religion, they use reading books, whatever it is, but get something in place. But I would say shopping and having an extra few cups of coffee a day probably isn't the end of the world, as long as you're not spending more than you can afford, in which case, yes, it could start to become a compulsion and something that needs to be looked at. But other than that, I think if you're enjoying your life a bit more and that involves shopping, then go for it. Um, the last one that was on the post was about Christmas and dealing with Christmas. Um, for this kind of stuff, I think it's always worth bearing in mind. And again, this is something I sort of explore in the new book. For me, I genuinely think alcohol is one of the toughest drugs to kick. Okay, and the reason I say that is because don't forget what addiction is. It's when the addict, and it's no matter what the drug is, but obviously we're talking primarily about alcohol, it's when the addict believes that they need their drug to fully enjoy or cope with life. Okay, that's for me what it comes down to. Okay, now alcohol, above any other drug out there, is something that we're daily told we have to enjoy life. I mean, comments like a night out isn't as much fun without alcohol. Okay, people just accept that. That's a truth for us. It's a lie, but we all think it's true. And it's phenomenal. I mean, think of what that comment means. So a night out isn't as much fun without alcohol. Okay, it means exactly the same thing as I need alcohol to enjoy a night out. Okay, which also means I'm reliant on a chemical substance to fully enjoy my life. Okay, it's ridiculous. But my point is, with alcohol, we face this on a constant basis. So if your key to releasing yourself from addiction is to believe that you no longer need that drug to cope with or enjoy your life, the hardest one to come across is alcohol, because you've got nearly 90% of the population drinking and all of them telling you how much fun it is. So that makes it incredibly difficult to stop. So I think you do need to keep it in perspective, especially at times like Christmas. Alcohol is a chemical depressant, okay? All it does is make you feel slightly dulled, and that's it, okay? It's, in the grand scheme of things, it's actually a fairly pathetic drug. It doesn't do an awful lot, okay? But it's all the hype and the belief that we build up around it. One of the big things with socialising as well, don't forget, when you're relaxed and happy, you get a serotonin and endorphin buzz, okay? Humans are designed to socialise with other humans, and when you do that, you get that warm, fuzzy feeling and things feel good. The key is you only get that feeling when you're relaxed and happy with other people and socialising with them. Now, we're also creations of society, and when you go out to socialise with people, you're also slightly nervous about what they'll think of you if you say something stupid, all the rest of it. So when you go into a social situation, there's a period, okay, where you're not relaxed enough to get that endorphin and serotonin buzz, okay? It takes a few minutes. So you go there, and after 20 minutes, half an hour, you start to relax, you start to enjoy yourself. Because alcohol's a depressant, it anaesthetises that feeling of nervousness. So it gives you that buzz. It's not an alcohol buzz, it's a serotonin endorphin buzz. And that's one of the reasons, going back to what I was saying before, when you drink alone at home, because what you're looking at is not, I enjoy my evenings because I'm in company. What you're supposed to be looking at is the actual effect of the alcohol. If you mix it with socialising, you start to think it's doing something that it isn't, because you have a drink and you feel great, but that great feeling is just the serotonin buzz, not dopamine, endorphin buzz that you get from socialising. Okay, so it helps, I think, to keep it in perspective. It's just a drug that we take through consuming a drink. Keep it in perspective, and don't big it up too much. Right, I'm just going to have a look now and see if there's any questions from this specific. I think we're all good. Shame there's still not a large range of drinks offered at work events. Yeah, there is actually. That kind of irritates me a bit. I went to a work event not long ago, and all the alcohol was free, absolutely free all night, and I ordered an orange juice and was told I had to pay for it, which is absolutely ludicrous. It really irritated me. Why don't more cafes, bars stop non-alcohol drinks? I think one of the problems is because alcohol, when it wears off, it leaves this unpleasant, anxious feeling that needs replacing. When you drink alcohol, you tend to drink a lot. but when you're drinking soft drinks, you don't. You drink one or two. And I think that's, although it's lovely to see bars serving non-alcoholic drinks and even completely alcohol-free bars, I have to wonder about the financial viability of it. Because if you've got people in buying alcohol, they drink all night and constantly buying drinks. Whereas if you've got people in drinking soft drinks, they're going to drink a third, a quarter of what other people are drinking. So it's a lovely idea, but I do wonder how people, because ultimately these people are running businesses, not charities, and they need to make money on it. Which I suspect one of the problems, and I don't know what the answer to that is. Just seeing if there's any other questions here. I think that's pretty much it. Sorry, I'm just having a look at the comments here. I think some problems with the book arriving, and I think, sorry, that's something you just have to pick up with Amazon, I'm afraid. I think that's pretty much it. Yep, so I think that's pretty much it for questions, unless I'm missing anything. Oh, I think it's nearly half an hour anyway, so that's probably about right. So yeah, good. I hope that was useful for everyone. I'll probably do another one shortly. I'm going to try and aim to do these sort of once a week or so if it's helpful. As I say, it's just been a bit hectic at the moment with work and trying to get the new book banged out as well, which is slightly difficult. But anyway, hopefully it was enjoyable, and see you all soon. Thank you.